welcome, welcome, welcome. A little bit of a technical glitch this morning. So if you're out there, maybe you would be kind enough to put something in the chat, which would be awesome. And so today's topic, now we're on. Okay, this is all good. So today's topic is shoulda, woulda, coulda. And I should have done this. It would have been better if I could have done something differently, or they could have done something differently. And the biggest one out of those three, I think, is the should, that they all the shoulda, woulda, coulda triad comes out of the should assumption. And we all know that we shouldn't should on ourselves, right? So let's take a look at this crazy dynamic of looking at, it's often with past events, right? Things that have happened is when we say, well, they should have done this, or I should have done that. And what does that accomplish? It gives us, because we've been talking about self beat up this week, and how we can go into sort of this death spiral of self-punishment. And one of the vehicles of that, one of the most effective and pernicious vehicles of that, is the shoulda, woulda, coulda, where we kind of look back at a circumstance and say, place judgment on it, and then go from that place of judgment to beating ourselves up for not having other resources, or beating others up for not meeting our expectations. And it all comes back to expectations. One of the things that I coach people in is shifting from expectation to intention. And expectations can be a very, very slippery slope to emotional violence toward ourselves and others. Good morning, Dennis. Maggie says good morning. She's busy getting loved up this morning, so she's enjoying being petted today. Anyway, we're talking about judgment and this whole shoulda, woulda, coulda thing. So people live for years and years with regrets about how they behaved in certain circumstances, or things that transpired in their lives. Good morning, Andrea. Welcome. So we're talking about how to transform and Rosalind, good morning. So good to have you here. And Susan, welcome. All you guys chiming in. I had a little bit of a technical glitch in the beginning, so I am thrilled to see you guys showing up, to know that all is good and it's working. So this 20 hindsight is 2020. So it's very easy to look back at circumstances of our lives and make a judgment and say, I should have, if I had only done this, I would have. Happy to have you here, Susan. So shoulda, woulda, coulda. I could have done this instead. I should have done that. If only they would have, if only I would have. And this is the recipe for regret. Because when we look, we were talking yesterday about failure versus feedback. And when we look at situations that we're less than proud of or less than satisfied with, whether it be our behavior or the behavior of others, when we look back, hello, Robert, welcome. So good to have you here with us. when we look back on circumstances, we can choose to use them as a vehicle to criticize and punish ourselves, or we can use those circumstances to gain information, to gain to utilize those circumstances as feedback to find lessons that move us forward in a more positive direction. However, many of us get stuck in the shoulda, woulda, coulda loop, and that can last for years and years and years. And when we look at circumstances from the past, saying we should have behaved differently, what we're not recognizing is, and this is a chosen assumption, okay? This is something that I choose to believe. It may or may not be true. All of our beliefs maybe I think are subject to assessment, evaluation, question. You know, they're not absolutes. These are our individual beliefs and opinions, but I choose to believe that we all do the best that we can do in any given moment. It may not be great. We may not be in our most resourceful mode, but in any given moment, I do believe that we do the best that we can do. Nobody's out to do the worst they can do in a given moment. At least if they are, I haven't met those people. And with the assumption that we do the best that we can do in any given moment, the shoulda, woulda, coulda thing is kind of a waste. Now, is that said, there's maybe more possibility in the could category, because we might be able to say, well, in the future, I could, should this circumstance arise again, I can see where I might be able to respond differently. I could take this perspective on it. So there is a bit of a possibility in the could category as we move forward. But coulda, shoulda, woulda, or coulda, woulda, shoulda is should have, could have, would have. So what we're talking about there is the past. And the way we contextualize the past is very significant and relevant to the way that our future unfolds, the way that we carry things into the future. Because for the most part, we unfortunately, and we do talk about this all the time, how the solution to pretty much everything is to being present. And in this moment, I am the collective experience of my life. And if I'm carrying the past into this present moment, into my interpretation of this moment, and to some degree it's pretty much unavoidable to do so. I mean, we are a function of our experience, and even our perceptions are colored by our past experience. When we bring this into the present, the way that we pull our past into the present does shape our present moment, which shapes the future. So if we can, and I do believe we have the ability, we do constantly rewrite the past, because once it's past, it doesn't exist except within us as a perpetuated perception. We can change our past and thereby our present and our future by changing the perception of the past. And when we do the coulda, woulda, shoulda thing, what that pattern does typically is it embeds regret, it embeds blame, because usually there's a judgment, a negative judgment that is provoking those conversations. Now, if we look at an event, if we look at the past and we evaluate it by saying what might have been more effective, so that I can move that into my present behavior, my present perception, my future behavior, that's a different story. I'm really talking about how we use this coulda, woulda, shoulda dynamic as a way to mire ourselves in the regrets and the behavior of the bully that is working to keep us small and potentially stuck. So when I'm just thinking about the dynamic of looking at the past with regret and how to interact with that. And I think part of the dynamic of regret that occurs through this, that's reinforced with the coulda, woulda, shoulda thing, is shame, self-blame, guilt, disappointment. There's a whole collection of these emotions that when we activate them keep us stuck. And one of the, it's interesting because I've noticed that a lot of people believe that the way that they can motivate themselves, that the way that they can keep themselves in line, the way they can make themselves productive, the way that they can be most effective is through bullying themselves into action. And I think that that's where this coulda, woulda, shoulda thing too comes into play, is that if I feel bad enough, that will motivate me to behave differently. And in some cases, I think that can be true. It's like if I aversion therapy, I guess we can think of it in that way. If I feel the pain, the consequence, the painful consequence of something, of my behavior, or of a certain way of being, if I feel the pain of that profoundly enough, that can be a motivation to avoid that behavior again in the future. The thing is that I see in so many cases that that's really not how it works. That in many cases, what I've observed is that self-punishment breeds more self-punishment. And what we end up learning is how to punish ourselves and how to be punished. And it's not necessarily a corrective. In fact, the experience of feeling that we deserve to be punished is what gets reinforced, because we keep telling ourselves how bad and wrong we are. And if we're bad and wrong, then we need to be punished. So I think it's, in some way, shape, or form, it's kind of a really self-perpetuating negative cycle that just goes round and round and round and deeper, miring us in this kind of negative behavior. So of judgment and self-abuse, and sometimes abuse of others too, because we project out our judgments of ourselves on others, and the world outside reflects the internal world. So if I'm feeling really bad, for instance, about my body or my weight or my whatever, something about me, let's say weight. If I'm obsessed or disappointed or upset with myself and my body, it's likely that I will be looking at other bodies and I will be judging other bodies. And if I see a behavior in others that I see in myself that I am struggling with, the likelihood is that I will see those behaviors and that I will be very critical of those behaviors in others. Why? Because I'm critical of those behaviors in myself. And I think this is another aspect of the shoulda, woulda, coulda thing, because what we're doing is we're making a judgment, we're projecting that judgment. And then as we impose that judgment, there are all kinds of emotional consequences and dynamics that are attendant to that judgment. So, as this weight example, I have had a conversation with someone who has historically struggled with weight and has a close relative who is heavy, and so that dynamic in trying to influence that person or judging that person was very much a projection of the inner struggle that the judger had regarding their own circumstances. So when we have an external with someone that's close to us, we might be projecting our own intensity, our own self-judgment on someone else. So I'm trying to think of other circumstances. Even if what came to mind is order. So I know someone who is very, very meticulous in keeping everything in its proper place, because there is a proper place. Like that in itself is a foundation assumption, right? A proper place. But that things need to be in a very, very precise order. And I guess, this is sort of maybe it's an OCD kind of behavior a little bit, but, like needing things to be very specifically ordered. All the boxes need to be lined up exactly straight. And, it's interesting because I can see that there's a perfectionism. Let's talk about the perfectionism. Perfectionism is also kind of a very is a setup for self punishment, right? Because it could be, and then life just doesn't comply, right? Humans make plans and God laughs. That, I love that saying, but we make plans and God laughs. So when things are not in this place of order, the projection is that something's wrong. and this is how it should be, and this is how people should be, and this is how people should behave, and this is how I should perform, and this is how, to be projecting all of these judgments on life, these expectations, is a recipe for the experience of failure, for the experience of inadequacy. And the question that we get to entertain for ourselves and for others is, how do we know that's how it should be? Where is this should standard coming from? And how can we instead allow ourselves to be present to what is? Life unfolds, and yes, we have intentions of fulfilling our values, of living into certain values, and we have preferences about how we would prefer things to be, and that's different. There's a distinction in frequency, I think, in energy, when we talk about intention versus expectation, when we talk about a desire versus should, or a preference versus should. This is how it should be instead of this is how I prefer it to be, or I would have preferred. And there is a very maybe subtle and yet at the same time tremendous difference in the beingness behind those two different perspectives, where if I expect things to be a certain way, and we've talked about this before, things that either meet my expectations or they don't. And it's pretty black and white. When I have an intention, I have the freedom to not quite make the mark. Like I can say, well, this is my intention, and if Maggie's got a lot to say today. If I fall short of my intention, I can correct, I can self-correct. So I can adjust myself to become in alignment with the intention that I've set, versus I didn't meet my expectation, because that's so clear cut and black and white. Same thing with goals, intentions versus goals. Goals again are black and white. And I should have done this, I should have done that. If we can shift the shoulda, woulda, coulda to I prefer, or I choose, or I desire, or I intend, is very, very different. I mean, feel into yourself and feel the difference of the freedom of allowing things to be as they are, especially when we look at the past. I would have preferred to do it this way, or in the future, I can choose differently. The idea is to get out of the cycle of punishment to empowerment, to move from punishment to empowerment. That's really what it's about. To find ways that we can utilize our experience to grow and evolve into the expression of life that we choose. So, it's really interesting. On NPR the other day, there was a show talking about who are we really, and maybe we get to talk about this in more depth another time. But when we would be asked, who are we? Or who are you? People might initially have a clear response, and then the deeper you go, the more fuzzy it got as to who we are. And what arose for me in looking at my answer to that question is, I am a vehicle for life expressing itself. And as such, what is it about for me? What it is about for me is growth and evolution and presence, and to be evolving to ever more presence. And so that whatever dynamics we can discover or unearth to support us in being more present, I'm all for it. And part of that is freeing ourselves from the tyranny that we impose on ourselves about our failed past, our failures. And when we convert those failures to feedback rather than failure, then we're not anchored and chained to that moment where perhaps we would have preferred to do things differently. We can utilize it as a fuel for our future expression and our present expression. We can allow the experiences to be fueling our present expression, or to be freeing our present expression, because the past does not define the future unless we use it depending upon how we use it, right? So we can continually reinforce the past, and therefore it will reinforce and predict the future. But at any moment, the freer we can become from our past, the greater our freedom to be truly responsive to the invitation of the moment. So it's kind of a deep well that we get to mine for our resources. And the shoulda, woulda, coulda thing is something that we get to transform into I prefer, or I choose, or I desire, for example. So on that note, I just want to say thank you for joining me. As always, it's such a gift to be here with you. And I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection. And I go live each weekday morning here on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page. And please check out all the other programming on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page, and the other wonderful Enlightened World Network properties, EWN, One with the Earth, and Enlightened World Living. And thank you guys so much for being with me. So much love to you. And let's choose to love and learn from each moment. So with that, so much love to you.